Broadcasting. All right. Welcome, everybody. It is the Digital Roundtable. It is May 19th, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a great show today. It's another day in paradise. Seems to be raining in most of the states that we are being followed. And let me go to our only incredible John Sibley Butler. John, how are you? Let's take away some music.
I am doing fine. I'll let the music here. May see a corn on a run. J'ai vu faire une lettre. T'enverrai peut-être si vous avez le temps. Je viens de recevoir mes papiers militaires pour aller à la guerre avant mercredi soir.
Excellent, John. Excellent. How are you today, John?
I'm doing fine. The big news in Austin, Texas is the weather. It seems like we can't get it right. They say it's going to rain. It doesn't rain. We've had lots of rain. The other big news is the masks. The masks are coming off, according to the governor, and it makes one think, I wonder will we have to do a mask removal concert like we did the mask put on? That is, do we have to put in as much energy to take the mask off as we had to put the mask on? But it's a mixed bag here. Many merchants are saying here in San Antonio and Houston that they will still require masks to protect their workers. But it's certainly a big element as we try to get back to normalcy in terms of quote unquote the economy. So that is the big news here. Everybody's discussing it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Llewelyn, how are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. I'm in Washington today, just arrived, got off the Amtrak at Sella at 2 minutes to the hour, and an hour later, here I am talking to you. So all is well. Of course, I had to have some words with John Sibley Butler, but that's the price I pay for fame.
That's awesome.
It's not enough.
Well, our awesome guest today is an old friend, Jim Steffes. Jim, how are you, sir?
I'm doing extremely well. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, thanks for being with us. And you are, Jim, you are not in DC today. You're in Houston, Texas?
Today I'm in Houston, although I'm quickly and more often not now being up in DC with the new.
Well, we look forward to learning from you how you're going to relocate to East Texas and what's going on over there. Jim Steffes, let me introduce him formally. He's the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Regulatory Affairs at Washington Gas Light Company. He's a phenomenal pioneer in this industry. He's dedicated his life to shaping all kinds of things around the industry. Prior to WGL, he was the EVP of Corporate Affairs at Direct Energy, which is a largest retailer in the US with some 6 million customers or something like that, humongous. He was, prior to that, the CEO of a company called Circular Energy. He was the president of the Northeast Retail of Energy, and he was the president of a very pioneering company called Green Mountain Energy. Jim has served as board member of the Advanced Energy Economy, the Houston Technology Center, and the Better Business Bureau of Greater Houston and South Texas. He has a master's degree from Harvard Kennedy School and a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University. Additionally, Jim is a certified energy manager, a certified energy procurement professional, and an FSA credential level 2 candidate. Jim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank all of you. It's great to be here with you today. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely.
And happy to talk about Washington Gas at any point and about what we're seeing in the gas business. So I'll let the conversation go, but looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Let me start by saying that we track here sort of what are the big events impacting the economy in the U.S. And we track several big mega trends. So we look forward to getting your insights in all those. Let me start with the latest on COVID. COVID seems to be, dare I say, under control, somewhat under control. There seems not to be any big flares anywhere. Obviously, too many deaths already. One is too many. 584,000 plus is way too many. We continue to be on that number on a weekly basis, adding another 5,000 unfortunate cases. On the case front, things are trending down significantly. Vaccinations have been, I would argue, a total success. There are some 277 million Americans who have received the vaccination. We continue to be doing about 15 million a week. Except for those who want to reserve their rights not to take it, and they have that right. I would argue that by summertime, everybody that wanted to be vaccinated should have been vaccinated. And so it's really interesting. Jim, I'm curious, you were a direct for a long time, dealing with customers and all that, and you got to go and take care of customers sometimes and do certain things, and now you're switching to the gas business. Any big differences that you can see from COVID on lessons learned on the impact on either business over the last 12 months?
Well, yes, and again, from a customer standpoint, right? I think that we're I think, as without saying much, we're all grappling as I talk with the policy and regulatory leaders and where we operate, which is DC and Virginia and Maryland. We're all grappling with the fact that a number of households and the households that we're not traditionally sort of inside a lot of our assistance efforts, the LIHEAP programs and other programs. An extensive amount of households have been impacted, and we, as an industry, we're trying to figure out with policymakers and with the government, what are we going to do to get these households back to normalcy? How do we get them to a point where they can return to work without having a very large balance outstanding? And that's going to be a big issue. I think there's the broad question, you're seeing it again, and this is going to be an interesting summer for the power markets. We're going to see, where the volume's going to be. Are the power markets ready and capable? Are we going to come roaring back? And we're going to see price pressures on the electric and the gas markets. We've seen huge uptake, I think, on LNG lately, pulling gas out of the country. Where is that's going to go when we start getting cooling demand across the markets and the gas generators start really firing up? It's going to be an interesting time to see and what that means for customers' bills. We do have to, though, have really thoughtful, meaningful conversations about how do we get customers back to where we are. They're able to pay bills, we're able to send bills and collect, and we're able to keep providing affordable, reliable energy over the longer term.
Real quick, the economy seems to be either trading sideways or there's a lot of reshuffling going on, resetting going on. Do you see and I'm not trying to be political on anything, but do you see a shift, a macro shift from the prior administration to this administration as it relates to seems like gas prices are higher significantly. Everybody's talking a little bit about inflation. There seems to be a shifting about where we can drill or not. Do you see a significant change against gas at all?
I clearly look. I mean, elections have consequences, and I'd love to hear what Llewelyn and John have to say. But elections have consequences. There's a policy. There's a new direction. What President Biden has established. But I think it's beyond sort of the federal government, right? I mean, state and cities and counties are involved in this conversation. Corporations, businesses are involved in this conversation. I mean, independent of what we may read in some headline, consumers, businesses across the country, households, they're thinking about this differently.
Right.
We strongly believe gas, I think gas is a key part of today's energy ecosystem. And it's a part, we can talk about Texas at some point if you want to, and sort of Storm Uri, but it's a part of the future too. It's just such a huge conveyor of BTUs.
Yeah.
On a BTU basis. You have to think about it and appreciate it. And we're going to have to address questions of heat and use of gas, but for the time being, it needs to stay, and it needs to stay affordable and reliable.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Llewelyn. Llewelyn?
Well, I'm not sure whether this would not have happened. Some of these things would have not have come about anyway, had there not been a change of administration, had the election gone differently, because I think some of these problems were building, and COVID and the problems introduced by COVID really are not political. These are how it was handled was possibly political, but you have a lot of resetting. I call it resetting. For example, because of COVID, we feel differently about supply chains. We feel differently about just-in-time supply chains. We feel differently about some natural resources. Certainly with the Biden administration, there is an enormous emphasis on the problem of carbon in the atmosphere. And sometimes I wonder if the solution isn't nearly as catastrophic as the problem. I don't know that you solve everything by simply demonizing one fuel or pair of fuels. Coal is leaving the marketplace as coal. It may come back in some processed form because we have a lot of coal, but certainly for the time being, coal is not a factor. Natural gas is hugely important. Natural gas is the backbone of our electric production nowadays. It is also versatile in that we can build a new plant very quickly. I think General Electric Company used to say that in 92 hours, if a unit failed, they'd put in a new one. You compare that to any other way of making electricity, and that's very nimble. That's very, very dependable for the supplier of electricity. It's something they can look to. Quick replacement in the event of a machine breaking down, a turbine failing. And of course, you store natural gas. So you get the electricity when you want the electricity, not when nature dictates. So we have a tremendous job to do, which is quite an unsettling job. And that is of going from, in the electric utility, from a generator to a customer, a simple transaction, if you will, to a very complex one where you have to hook all these people up. You have to hook up wind turbines and solar power and intermittent gas and all sorts of parts of the electric supply equation that are relatively new and a lot less dependable than the old constituents of the electric supply equation. And I think that's affecting the way we think about things. I think, and I'm very keen to hear what Jim has to say, that there are going to be a lot of problems ahead as we move, say, from gasoline to electric vehicles. What do we do to keep a supply of gasoline for the gas-powered cars that will still be on the road? What do we do to with all the service stations, the gas stations? What do we do with companies like Jiffy Lube? There'll be no place for them. There are a lot of uncertainties out there. There's a huge enthusiasm for getting rid of carbon, anything that produces carbon, but it's quite unclear whether all the solutions are really going to be solutions and whether the resilience of the system can be maintained.
Johnny?
Yes, I think it's very true that elections certainly have consequences. And what happens if you're in strategy, which I think is a key to business enterprise, I always looked at strategy as creativity within the environment in which you find yourself. But if you look what has happened, Llewelyn is right. We can't say that it was certainly everything would be due to this election, but this is what we do know. Number one, we know that the taxes themselves are going up. We know that. in terms of corporate America, in terms of many Americans. And we also know that that produces a certain kind of uncertainty for planning, if you will, for the future. We also know, you know, in my world, that the whole idea of taxes might have a negative impact on new venture development or creativity in terms of new ventures and investments in new ventures. You know, the startup is about a $90+ billion investment with no safety net, if you will, for the most part. And in Texas, Jim, we don't want safety nets, we want trampolines. We're interested in really leaping forward. So I think with any change in administration, there will be some uncertainty over policy. But within all of that, it is left up to us to develop the strategy that will continue to provide jobs and opportunities for Americans. Now there'll be a lot of give and take about these kinds of policies, but certainly for us in Texas, the Obama administration was more concerned with sending money to California, to the West Coast, if you will, and the East Coast, for different kinds of investments in energy, and leaving the fossil fuels sort of to go for themselves. I think as we've said here, there will be a mixture of solutions. It will not be just wind, will not be just solar, and we think that fossil fuels will still be in the mix. So I think if we look at all the consequences, which has always happened in America, it is the creativity of strategy, whether it was Ford Motor Company, whether it was the cigarette companies, whatever have you, that would bring us through and create a new future for us. So if I might ask Jim a question in terms of his strategy.
Please.
How does he strategize, not only in the idea of what's going on with the government, but all of the creativity that's around you, and that's changing the business models of oil and gas, mixed models, and et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Yeah, just to put it in context, and a couple of interesting points about Washington Gaslight. You know, we were initially chartered by Congress in 1848, and to bring to light the Capitol and the White House. So the first use, of course, of natural gas was not really heating; it was lighting. And the Congress chartered Washington Gas, established it. And you mentioned coal. You know, initially, of course, there were no gas reserves, so we manufactured gas. You would know that in old technology, I think that came out of China, was being able to strip off.
Very old, but most industrial areas of the world use town gas, which was about almost a third of the energy content of natural gas, and which was also lethal if you inhaled it. It was a standby for suicides. I used to cover in England coroner's court, and week after week, she put her head in the gas oven. I mean, people did do this. It was a means of ending their lives. Yeah. But they used to add some substance to the gas to give it a strong odor, so you knew if it was around, because it was lethal, but it worked very well for a long time. And then came natural gas, an order of magnitude of improvement. And then we went through that strange period when the administration, the Carter administration, declared it to be a depleted resource. Finish, don't talk about it. And as a result, we got the Fuel Use Act, and that is hard to imagine that we even wanted to put out the eternal flame in Arlington Cemetery to save this precious substance. I went to Wall Street and gave a talk suggesting that eventually gas would be used in the production of electricity again, and they laughed at me and thought that I was totally bonkers for suggesting. One of the chaps, I heard him saying to his friend as he was leaving, natural gas for electricity, what has he been smoking? And then along came, and I think it's very important, Jim, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. It wasn't just that we increased the supply of natural gas, we got out of all that nonsense of intrastate gas, interstate gas, hydrogenous gas, but also with fracking, almost simultaneously, came along the aeroderivative turbine, which was a much better machine than the heavy frame turbine, which had been used until that point. So you had this fortuitous combination of a supply of fuel and a machine that was very, very efficient at using. And I believe in a combined cycle, you can get 64% efficiency, unheard of in energy production.
Well, and flexible, and extremely flexible, right? I mean, extremely. Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about the Fuel Use Act, right? Which the same time, of course, you had PURPA, passed, and I'm in the same camp. The two, well, I joined the energy business really in '94, but where I spent my time and where I started was I worked with Inga one summer. In the summer of '93, I was a graduate student, and luckily enough had this wonderful work for a guy named Skip Horvath, if you knew Skip.
Yeah, of course, I knew him quite well.
Anyway, long story short, I had two jobs. One was to model the financial returns of pipelines after 636, because this is '93, 636 being one of the seminal decisions, for those that don't know, and sort of unbundling and sort of making the gas business finally a shipper service. And you would know, Llewelyn, right? Inga wanted to show that, of course, the FERC rules were not that favorable to getting their authorized returns. The second half of the year of that summer, I wrote a paper for Inga, because there was a company in Houston that wanted to know what the EPAC 92 meant for the gas business. And for those that, of course, know EPAC 92, probably one of the most important, you had the creation of the EWGs exempt from PUCA, so you could build sort of standalone non-PURPA machines. But you also had Section 211 added to the Federal Power Act, which allowed for transmission wheeling. And of course, then FERC expanded that with 888 and 889 and all the subsequent orders. But that PURPA, that aeroderivative, PURPA building the sort of the merchant industry and sort of these creative entrepreneurs, you talk about that, thinking, how am I going to go get contracts and all of these elements together with utilities to finance these 20-year machines, the aeroderivative technology, and then the gas industry basically saying we're now awash with gas and prices falling from we don't have any gas at all to here as much as you want, wherever you want it, we'll get it there. But you're right in terms of the hydraulic for us at Washington Gas. I mean, and everybody's seen this. It's totally changed. I mean, I remember sitting at dinner one time in DC talking about how many import terminals we were going to have. LNG, 36 or something.
You've got you right now there in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. You have Cove Point, designed as an import terminal, now functioning as an export terminal.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the point is, you still have to be competitive with your, what do they call? We never changed it. British thermal units. I don't know. We didn't change that to bow mount thermal units, but that's where we are now.
We dropped the British part. That's
my question is, it's so much out there in your going back to the strategy and how you compete.
So let me jump into something, because in the notes that we shared today, there's quite of activity going on, right? I mean, people are talking about all kinds of things, and I'm gonna come back with some, sort of high-end questions that I'm curious to see if we can make sense of it. But Duke Energy is being attacked by activists to get broken up because the company has 3 natural businesses. Tesla is shifting to new battery technology, lithium iron phosphate, to grow at an accelerated pace into the utility scale business. NERC is saying that this summer, California, Texas, New England, and the Midwest are going to have outages and rolling blackouts. That's already predicted. We have the issue with the Colonial Pipeline that took the East Coast to its knees on gasoline. And honestly, and the most amazing thing, there's a bipartisan effort in Maine to get rid of the IOUs and turn the whole state into a muni. I mean, and more importantly, here's my dilemma, gentlemen. I'm just a plain engineer. So when I think about what is happening, right, you hear everybody talking, and I wonder who is advising the powers that be. Okay, we need electric vehicles. All vehicles should be electric. But let's just do the math real quick. 400 million registered vehicles. Let's say they all go electric. Okay, if they all go electric, they will need 40,000 gigawatts of new power to charge them. Okay, that's a lot of gas turbines. Okay, and even if you wanted to do it with solar, it would be a significant amount of acres. It would take 8 million acres of solar PVs to deliver 40,000 gigawatts of energy. The United States today has an entire production capacity of just 1,100 gigawatts, okay? So we're talking that if all the cars go electric, we would need to add to the 1,100 gigawatts, 40,000 gigawatts. And furthermore, if all the homes and the businesses in America were producing energy, right, at 20 kilowatt hours per home and at 1 megawatt for CNI building, that would be an additional 2.9 gigawatts of energy that doesn't even make a dent on the 40,000 gigawatts. So, Jim, you are sitting on a gold mine of a business, sounds to me. Why is the feeling that this is the end of the industry? Why is that the feeling when we seem to be like the goal of growing to be carbon neutral electric is almost like an unbelievable amount of gigawatts that need to be created?
Yeah. Well, I don't feel it's the end. I mean, I think, I would tell everybody, a young person at college today, get an engineering degree, get a finance degree. The economy we demand for ourselves and our kids and our grandchildren will be more efficient, more effective, and built around the fact that we have 24/7, even more reliable power.
That's right.
This is a great moment. Now, you hit on a lot of things. I mean, and John hit on, what's the business model? Is it public ownership, private ownership? What's the installed fleet? How do we think about bringing in gas or hydrogen? How do we capture methane more effectively? All this is so I'm an optimist. I'm a technology optimist. I think we always solve problems. But it is, John, you earlier question. Look, these are tough strategic questions because you have to deal with today. Every electric is going to say, how do I get through this summer, right? Every gas utility do I have supply in the needs to meet next winter? And then how do I manage 5 years, 10 years, and 40 years out? Because these assets are not overnight assets that you sort of discard away. And so we're thinking about that. We're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in making sure our pipes are fit for purpose. And the pipes that fit for purpose today were different than they were 20 years and different than they were 50 years ago. And we have to keep doing that. And policymakers understand that you need to make sure that because we're demanding a safer, always safer, and we're thinking about it from a risk basis. They're also demanding that we need to make sure there's no methane that's not being used and being released. So I think this is a great time to be in the energy space. It is, between the digital side of it, the hardware side of it, the capital and corporate side of it, and sort of the macro. We go back to your opening conversation. Where do the macro policy questions? How are you going to find this balance as leaders, and how do we work with leaders to help us find the balance? It's a great time. It's super exciting, and the end of energy is nowhere close. Nowhere close.
Let's go back to one of Andrea's points that I got to get Llewelyn to write about in his poetic way. Is that, look, the people are demanding the breakup of Duke Power Company. Look, as business models change and companies become much stronger, the idea of a monopoly, and I've said this before, for intellectual-based companies, that is, companies who have intellectual kind of ideas, which are really not commodities, because sitting on top of the commodity is the science. So Andrea said, what about breaking up this energy company? Should we seek policies then that would keep intellectual policies together? That might be a good thing to be said about a monopoly, as Schumpeter would say about AT&T in the old days before it broke up and then got back together. So my question going forward, as we think about these grand kind of policies, do we have to think differently about what is a monopoly? Do we have to think about how the companies that become so big actually serve us? Should we think about breaking up, for example, a Google? Can anybody do a Google? Can anybody do a Microsoft? So what do you think about going forward? Because we're going to run into these problems as companies converge and technologies go around the world. And the Andres who really write and do all the smart cities, there's only 3 of them in the whole world that can do all of this. So what does it mean as we think about our old policies going forward when technology is bringing them together? I mean, this is not like a monopoly on syrup or a monopoly on Coca-Cola. This is a monopoly on things that's very, very intellectual with deep science behind it. How do we think about that?
Llewelyn, you want to take that one?
Well, I will tackle Andres.
And then I'll build on your comments, Llewelyn.
Be careful of drawing exponential lines, Andres. You've been at the graph paper, and it's always a terrible thing. I sat through all those debates in the energy crisis with people drawing lines that we would have to have this, and then the demand fell away. So things were different. Electric demand leveled out, and it continues to be very level or actually somewhat declining because of greater efficiencies and a changed electric regime. The big driver, which was the deployment of air conditioning, etc., that was fulfilled. And so you didn't have the 7.5% that you had in the 1970s of growth. And every time I hear about the sky is falling because so much will be needed, I'm inclined to doubt it. I remember us all sitting around wringing our hands and saying, if all the Chinese had a Volkswagen, there'd be no fossil fuel left on Earth. Well, a lot of the Chinese do have small cars and some have big cars, and there's no shortage. So you've got to be careful about these the sky is falling kind of projections. On the other hand, I don't think we're going to get rid of anything we have except maybe coal. I think we're going to have a long transition period to those electric cars. I think it's an enormously brave move of General Motors to go to producing almost exclusively electric vehicles, which are still in many ways unproved in the market. About 2% of the country has turned to them. In California, they say that some percentage of the people who have electric vehicles are so worried about charging, they wouldn't repeat it until charging gets a lot more pervasive than it is now. So this is a period, and Jim is quite right, of huge challenge, huge excitement, but to retire natural gas prematurely, either in policy or in our minds, or to retire oil, and I'm more interested in the transition. What will happen to all those gas stations and the people who worked in them? How many will you have to fuel the fleet that has not converted to electricity and which may never convert to electricity? Likewise, with natural gas, I think the uses for natural gas are so plentiful, from being a feedstock in plastic manufacture to essential in making fertilizers, and of course the huge home heating and cooking market. Are we going to get rid of that? I don't think so. I think we're going to get better at a lot of things. We're going to get better at containing methane leaks. I think that's high priority and essential, because that's a lot more destructive than anything that is coming out of the combustion. and we're going to get better at combustion. I'm not sure about carbon capture and storage, but it's a possibility. It is a possibility. And there you have it. Change, and yet some things will remain remarkably constant. Beware of that graph paper and those lines on it.
Just real quick, I think, Llewelyn, I think you misunderstood what I said when I was proposing some data to back up a question that I think is the essence of the renewable energy guys are trying to shut down all the fossil fuels, and they don't understand what they're signing up for.
I agree with that. I agree, absolutely.
For every 10 million cars that go electric, we will need to increase our peak production capacity of electricity by another 1,000 gigawatts, which is the entire production capacity of the United States today. 10 million new electric vehicles will need an additional 1,000 gigawatts, which is double of the entire production capacity today.
And that's going to bring about monopoly.
If we get to 400 million electric vehicles, we will need to add an additional 40,000 gigawatts.
Well,
the question is, what is the technology to do that, knowing that we cannot make something work 24/7 at 60 hertz flawlessly without energy storage or without some kind of base fuel, right?
I agree, but we're not going to have all those vehicles running simultaneously. You're not going to have 400 million vehicles running all the time and charging all the time. Most vehicles sit in garages or driveways or wherever they.
So now you're proposing with your logical first answer, without thinking of all the effects of this, that you're going to control and manage every human being in America to charge whenever you want to, not whenever they want to.
I said no such thing, and I think no such thing. And you may wish that I thought it because you could attack me, but you cannot attack me because I don't think it and I don't propose it. I think we should hear from Jim, but I would just say about Duke Energy, that is not an attack by the public wanting it to be a muni. Yes. That is an attack by shareholders who want more money, and the current chairman is good. There is known to be very conservative, and clearly the utility has been managed in a conservative way and simply hasn't been making its allowed rates of return.
Yeah. So let me go back to Jim on something. Jim, you and I have talked about this offline. I'm curious about your thoughts of the following, right? So natural gas is one of the elements, one of the commodities that enables us to do all kinds of great things in our homes and at work and so on. You today are delivering that natural gas as a commodity, and then I do something with it. But you could, in theory, you and all the gas companies in America could decide that you want to get into the business of energy as a service, and you actually want to own the equipment at the side of the house, at the limiting meter, and you want to, you could do chillers, you could do, electricity, you could do the HVAC. Do you see the possibility of all these new business models or potential players? What do you think could happen here? As in my opinion, there's going to be an incredible amount of growth in appetite for more and more BTUs and kilowatts.
Yeah, I think I can see a future, a couple scenarios. And I can go both ways. I mean, it's interesting, John, a couple times brought up this monopoly and sort of, are we ending up in a world where we're going to create bigger and bigger monopolies? And is that aligned with our sense of common good in the country? Where do we find our balance on that? I mean, we've had cycles where monopolies are good and the cycles where monopolies, even when they're not monopolies, are bad. I think that's an open question. So there's a scenario that you could say, well, what we need to do is allow more integration and let utilities do more for their customers but you have to then find a way around the policy and regulatory traps that can come from that. There's also a world, I mean, again, as you know, I think we're aligned as an energy infrastructure firm doing what we think we do well, which is we think we build, deploy, service, and maintain infrastructure to move natural gas. That's what we do well. And we think we can communicate that to our investors. And I think we can understand what that looks like for our customers and make sure, you know, and a point about how many cars will go electric, you know, demand has a way of saying, if you price me too high, I'm not interested, right? I mean, I don't know how many people can sell, you know, $500, whatever, you know, tennis balls, right? Not that many. You can make them, but not a lot of buyers for those. So I will wonder about that. I think the capital markets today want clear understanding of what your strategy is, and they want to understand what you're about, and they want to understand how you're going to take a dollar and deliver a dime.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they want. I think that's going to be a message, and I think that's where we are. But there are lots of scenarios, I mean, that you could see. And the beautiful thing about globally and even in the States, you know, I'm a fan of the federal system because I'm a fan of California trying out something that may be different, that Florida would try out something different, that the district in Texas can try out something different. And you know, we're still, though, I'll say that with the idea that we're still in this together in the US. And you know, it's not good for any part of the country when Texas has a multi-day outage, bringing its infrastructure down. It doesn't help people in New York. It doesn't help people in Texas when California has struggles. We're one economy, and you know, we're one country, and all of this works together and needs to work together. But I do like that we can try these different approaches. That Maine will want to municipalize, and that's an interesting question for the consumers there. And in the Carolinas and capital markets may want to see a smaller or divested or broken apart. Those are all good things in the long run, because you know, nobody has, you know, and I'm the first to admit, I don't have a crystal ball to know what is the totally right answer. I have views, and I think going back to John's points on strategy, scenarios where we think we can succeed. And I think that's what companies do every day, is where can they find a place to succeed with them, for their shareholders, but more importantly for their customers.
Yeah. Let me switch something back and get your thoughts on something, being a Texan for a long time. So we had our New England storm here in Texas, and there's still brouhaha going on in the legislature around ERCOT and what's going to happen. But we have a new CEO, which is the you know, former COO, you know, one of us, Brad Jones, came and went to New York, and now he's back running the show. And there's all kinds of changes on the PUC and so on. Do you see, and you know, and we have shared multiple times that ERCOT did a great job by not having a major blackout. And probably the biggest problem was the unintended consequences about the fees and the $9,000 charge for a period of time that maybe should have not been charged. That's kind of water under the bridge, since nothing is going to change there. But do you see a way to rationalize the dependency between the electric sector and the natural gas sector as it relates to these outages and peaks and valleys and regulatory and pricing? What's your thoughts on that, high level?
Well, man, I do see a way to do it, but that's a different, but it's a, look, we've talked about it. It did rationalize it, you know, ultimately, you know, and nobody likes the outcome. It did work, and now it's back operating again, which is the typical way that we resolve, you know, unfortunately. There's a lot of elements that came out of that. Hopefully, the legislature can do some good things, and then we can allow the, you know, again, as somebody who was in the Texas power market for a lot of years, I'm not today, so I'm just watching it from afar and sort of observing. But I certainly hope, and I wish the best for the new commissioners at the PUCT, as they sort of now can roll up their sleeves and sort of decide, okay, what do we need to do? You know, I'll tell you the one thing that I think we need to really think more clearly around is more market-driven uses of digital meters in the advanced meters. I mean, I think we've underdeployed the value of those meters in these instances. You know, this is a world where if one retailer decides to fail or didn't properly hedge, other retailers pay for that loss. And then they pay for the loss twice when they get polar customers that may or may not be economically rational. I think we need to have a conversation about, you know, if you know, how does that work, and what are we really deploying and using the digital meters the right way? And look, the other piece of this has to be, you know, I'll give a great example. Communication failed. You know, how many people in Houston have pools, right? And what does my pool do when it gets below 30 degrees, 35 degrees? It goes into anti-freeze mode. And so what did my pool pump do all day long when it was 15 degrees? It ran. So this, you know, across the market, all these pool pumps are running. Now, if I had known, I could have, you know, emptied my pipes. I could have disconnected that. I could have taken some water out, and I could have managed it differently, sort of winterized in the same way. But we didn't, you know, nobody told me over the weekend to do that. You know, it was a little bit of communication, but it wasn't that much. But then every time my circuit would come back up at my house, what came back on? Not, you know, not just my house, but my pool pump, which at the end of the day, you know, if you have a pool and you needed to insure it. But those are the kind of things. So I would start with communication. I mean, I don't know if we did that well. I'd say we didn't do it well, and I'll take it, you know, accept some responsibility, you know. But what else? What other load didn't need to be on that we didn't signal, and we could have signaled in a much clearer and almost down to a household and appliance level, and. In 2020, we just didn't do it. So I'll leave it at that. Lots to do. It looks to me like that we'll get the legislature done, and then I think the PUCT will continue to do work. And you said earlier, I mean, we'll see what happens this summer, and if there's a fix. But you're right. There needs to be conversation between the gas and the power sectors in a way, and we need to be, you know, and helped by the PUCT and ERCOT and the Railroad Commission to have those conversations.
Look, Johnny, you have a follow-up?
No, I think it's good. I think that there's an old saying that in America, we put the stop sign up after the accident. And I think that in this case, you know, we really didn't think about it from a data analysis point of view of putting stop signs up. And so when you say that, I mean, nobody covered their plants either. Nobody covered, you know, I mean, how many plants were lost during the freeze? I mean, on the agriculture side. So it's a classic of the signal and the noise. And what we do have data to do now, though, is we have a lot more data to develop more signals, but it doesn't mean that they are lead pipe sensors, you know. Yeah. So,
Right.
and that was
just.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I beg your pardon. I'd just like to go back to the monopoly issue for a moment. It seems to concern my African friend. And monopolies, while they're growing, while they're creative and innovative, and that applies to Google, probably to Microsoft, I'm not sure, it may have crossed over the meridian. But until such time as they move from being creators, adding to society, to being rent takers, subtracting from society or negative, then they should be broken up. But they're not inherently evil, but they can get themselves in a position where they no longer contribute creatively to the society, and then it's time to look at it. And AT&T, which I thought was pretty clever company, it ran the Sandia National Laboratory, and of course it had Bell Labs. But when it was broken up, we just saw a surge of creativity across the telecoms world that we would not have seen in good old AT&T times. And so that's worth bearing in mind. And the point you raised about municipals versus investor-owned, this has been argued out for time immemorial. we've got an awful lot of public power. It doesn't actually produce that much of our electricity, about 20% of it. So you have 60 companies producing 80% of it, and 2,000 small entities producing 20%. That does seem to be inherently inefficient, but I'm not sure it's been proved to be such.
And remember that the average enterprise can fail, but utilities cannot.
Right.
No, they go into.
Take it, Jim.
That's
Take
right.
it,
They
Jim.
can't fail.
You don't want to take that on. Tell us
But
cornflakes fail, but
Well, you know what we've seen with deregulation? We've seen disaggregation, and after a while, aggregation.
Yes.
We saw that in the telephone system. It's part of business. It's financially attractive to do.
Yeah. Jim,
But, you know, on that point though, you know, somebody at some point, some business school is going to do a study of Texas. You know, I mean, if you think about Texas, you know, going through deregulation, you had three large, you know, in munis. I mean, there is a wonderful case that needs to look at, because you had AEP, of course, Central and Southwest, you had Houston Industries, and you had Texas Utilities. And of course, each one took a different path around where they went, functionally and corporately, and then sort of, I mean, Central and Southwest, CPLW2 sold off their customers at the beginning, and ended all customer relationships. So there needs to be, I've always wondered why somebody at UT or one of these great business schools hasn't looked hard to see what the corporate decisions were and done case studies. Maybe there are case studies on that to sort of understand, because it does all about disaggregation, aggregation, divestiture, what's the right break apart between the industry, where are the alignments between different functions, and integration or not. So there's a case study waiting to happen 20 years in.
Economics rather than.
Yeah.
I hardly have the temerity to say this to Professor Butler, but we have a shibboleth out there which causes companies to come together. It's called synergy. It never seems to work. After a while, those that were brought together in pursuit of synergy split apart in pursuit of a more effective way of operating.
I do agree with it. I do agree with it. In other words, things are self-organizing, as my good friend who won the Nobel Prize said, Prigogine. They are self-organizing in the universe. And what we learned in our early experiments was also, we asked that same question. Can we bring things together from an institutional point of view, or should we introduce them so they can be self-organizing? And the self-organizing ones are the ones that really, really propel, if you will, Austin to where the city it is now.
yeah.
Yes, sir, I agree with you totally.
Let me go back to Jim. We got 7 minutes to go, Jim. See if we can get some more insights from you about the following. I know that WGL is a phenomenal company with a great parent, and you guys as a portfolio are in multiple states in Canada, and you know, as you go from the power industry to the gas industry, I'm wondering, to get your insights. You know, it seems like the power industry, it's inevitably destined to look more like ERCOT, with reps and wires companies and generation companies and lots of competition across the United States. And the dynamics of that seem to be fascinating, how this is all kind of happening with the different experiments in the 50 states. The gas industry seems to be slightly in a different construct. Could you elaborate a little bit about where do you see the big difference or challenges as it relates to now that you're in the gas space, and gas maybe having the ability to grow its share of delivering heating and cooling to America?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, look, at the end, at the high level, you know, we're delivering energy in some form to consumers. The power sector, my experience so far has been, and it's because it's, you know, more ripe for digitization,
Mhm.
And that makes sense. And I think just the physical flows of energy are different. Gas and power are different. But at the end of the day, the core function, and this is, we can talk about how you organize and self-organizing and wires and pipes and everything. Everything I've learned in my 4 months at the gas company and my experience in the energy space, if you're not adding value versus rent stripping, that's not a lasting model. You have to ultimately find a customer, and that customer ultimately in the short and medium and long term has to believe you're creating value. And we do it in different ways. I mean, municipalization or municipal electrics are just an easier way for a customer to express his or her pleasure because they can talk to the city council member as well as to the electric company. But I come back. I mean, the one thing that seems to remain true is it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to think that if you're not creating value for your customer, that you are going to be here for the long term. And how you organize and then how you operate in your business model, your regulatory model, the products you're trying to sell. If they're not working for the people that are buying them, they won't buy them. And that's, I guess, so they're different physically and sort of somewhat organizationally, and some of that's legacy of how the industry's grown up, and some of it's policy driven, where there's a focus a lot I've seen in the last, at least at the federal level, more on the power side. But they're the same in terms of you just got to address customers, and if you're adding value, they're going to want you to stay and grow and allow you to try to innovate with them. And that's my perspective.
Let the old professor mix historical cases here. When they asked Henry Ford, "What do your customers want?" and he said they want a faster horse. Llewelyn had no idea that the cell phone would change his life. No idea. So the strategy of creativity is what I'm saying is that the balance is to maintain customer satisfaction on the one hand, but also to provide better things for the customer in the future. Because Llewelyn didn't know, he had no idea that the cell phone would just control his life 20 years ago. And of course, Ford was right. The customers always said, "Hey, can we have a faster horse?"
Yeah.
So my question is, in strategy, I think I've always looked at it in terms of creativity. What makes the energy industry so interesting is you're exactly right. The customer, we just want our lights to come on. We want our cars to start up, right? But there will be something in the future that will be the analog of Henry Ford. And what that would be, it would take the customer to new heights. And I think it relates to Andrea's conception in his books of the different kind of science cities, kind of cities that he's working on. I just gave it a new name, Andreas. You like that?
Yeah.
The science city. And so industry, when you look at it and study it, it's very, very different. So smart cities, I think, and you mentioned the meters, you mentioned everything talking to everything. I mean, tires talking to people. So there would be in the future the analog of Henry Ford. Now, I don't want you to answer that. I just wanted you to put that on your mind. And by the way, I'm not going to ask for a tuition check.
All right, you can ask. Go ahead and send the bill.
I must say that
that'll go with the stack of all the other ones.
Northwestern tuition check, not a Texas tuition check, a Northwestern tuition check.
I must say that John Butler has been extraordinarily perceptive today. He must have been reading my stuff.
Oh.
Interesting stuff. That's why strategy is so interesting. Right.
So Jim, closing here, you are from Houston.
Yep.
You're a Texan. I don't know if you've lived any extended period of time in DC, but what are your thoughts of living in East Texas?
Oh, well, I have lived, I lived in DC for school. I went to Georgetown, so,
Right.
up on the hilltop, and we've lived up in Philly and Connecticut. So I enjoy the East Coast or East Texas. I did look, but I will say, my wife would say I'm not a Texan because I wasn't born here. I got here as fast as I could, a couple
Okay.
months old, but I, unfortunately can't claim it. I still need that decree from the governor to sort of claim statehood. No, I'm looking forward to being up there. It's just nice. I mean, that's one of the things again about the federal and where we are. Every part. I mean, from California to DC and Florida and up to Maine, it's all beautiful. There's great parts and interesting people to meet and see. So I'm a big fan. Looking forward to it.
Well, we definitely enjoy you very much. We look forward to your new journey and staying in touch. And we want to remind you all, including our audience, that our annual conference coming up August 31st, September 1st and 2nd, Jim. And if you were available to join us, we would like to follow up with you on that. You've been very kind in the past to participate with us and have amazing conversations with incredible insights. So I hope you enjoy your sharing with us today. And any parting thoughts or anything you want to share?
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the return request to come back and in that bill. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim, and it's so good to see you again.
Good to see you.
And this has been a super program. You're very articulate, and I like what you have to say.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the interaction. Very good.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Johnny, take us away.
Okay. If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I like to do is to save every day like a treasure, and then again I will spend them with you. But there never seems to be enough time to do the things you want to do once you find them. I've looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go through time with. Thank you.
Excellent.
Look for those LSU. Look for those
Thank
Texas.
you.
Next year, look for those Texas flags.
I'll look for them.
The Longhorns will be in the championship game, and my alma mater, we
There
just
you
fly our flags. I can't get, I went to LSU for undergrad, and we just fly flags everywhere. We just use the flags. I don't know what it is, but I can't get my neighbors to fly their Texas flag. It's a different deal. Okay.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Andreas.
Thank you
Very
all.
much. I'm